Every vehicle, as you see, is a police car. Every vehicle is stopped, and sometimes the occupants are searched. Today they've found all manner of weapons. They've found lead pipes, rifles, baseball bats. One youth of 18 had a Ku Klux Klan hood. Another one came all the way from California. He'd been in some altercation with one of the troops and he'd had a face injury, and the colonel, the doctor, told me that he'd paid his own fare to fly in here just to enjoy a riot. A clergyman from Florida was found to have 4 rifles and 4 pistols in his car. There's a turbulent priest for you.
The world of broadcast news and entertainment was changing and expanding. There were opportunities everywhere. We had learned our trade on 10-minute films, but we were grown ambitious. We wanted to make bigger and better films with better billing and better pay. We began to produce tonight's specials, hour-long documentaries, not photographic essays, but hard-nosed documentaries on everything from the death of British shipbuilding to the glamorous wife of Europe's richest tycoon. One by one, we moved on to do our own programs in our own style. This was the first of these specials, Wicker, Gold, and Death in the Morning.
This is the BBC television service, home of the interlude. And we are viewing another marvelous interlude from our fast expanding interlude department. Let us see if we can guess what this gentleman is creating. Shall I start you off? I think he's making a fruit bowl. This music is rather pleasant, isn't it? May I venture another guess? Is it perhaps a hubcap? Or perhaps an ornamental garden mushroom? Well, whatever it is, he'd better hurry up because we've got a documentary about Alma Kogan next, a particular favorite of my own. Alma Kogan, the girl with a giggle in her voice. Oh, I think I've just guessed it. That's very clever. He's making a piece of clay.
Cogan's under it, and he's caught it just by
This is a lovely way to spend an evening. Hello there. Can't think of anything I'd rather do.
Alma Kogan is almost forgotten now, but once, from the mid-50s until the early 60s, she was one of the most famous faces on British television. Alma was more than a singer. She received the ultimate 50s accolade. She was a personality, a meter and a greeter, one of the first beneficiaries of the emerging television industry's need to create celebrities. The medium and her message seemed made for each other.
It was an era when the thing was to be the girl next door. The great word was intimate then. Television is intimate. You're playing to one person. So it was slightly coy when girl singers did a programme. It was that, oh, hello, so glad you could join me. Do come into, you know, and that sort of thing. Alma flounced on in her enormous dresses with a very upbeat number and belted it.
Come, my love, with me. Take me by the hand.
In the mid-50s, babies boomed, and so did Alma Kogan, singing out, above the sound of howling infants, to proud parents in new homes with freshly acquired television sets.
Alma Kogan was a really big sort of person. She filled people's lives in the 50s. I mean, she wore big dresses. She had a big face. She had glossy, shiny hair. She had a big voice. And she received big offers from big agents. I mean, she was large and gigantic. And we lived in a tiny, sort of sheltered, protected world as children in the 50s. And to us, she represented a kind of escape.
Show you turned on seems to be Alma Kogan on it, you know. I mean, in a way, for me and for people of my generation, she was my first experience of what we now call media, with a capital M. And because she was the first experience of it, as somehow, in a strange way, she was the strongest experience of it.
Come on, now, let's see you. Oh, your eyes and hold me tight.
The nearest equivalent today is Kylie Minogue.
Stairway of love tonight.
Alma Kogan was the kind of daughter people wanted to have. She was peppy without being threatening. She was glamorous without being sexy, and she seemed to embody the fantasy that if you were cheerful, things would be all right.
On television, in that fledgling journalistic form, the television magazine, on radio, on record labels, Alma Kogan provided what the Times needed, light in the murk of post-austerity Britain. She was the first female British singer to make #1 on the domestic hit parade and a fixture on the screen. So she was a logical choice when Lime Grove celebrated a decade of post-war television to represent the female face of mid-50s, pre-rock and roll, pre-teen music.
Introducing one of television's brightest stars, Alma Kogan.
The city is a great big smoking monster. Man is its slave by night and day. Man is the slave that only wants to get away. Say what you will, the countryside is still the only place where I could settle down. Troubles there are so much rarer out of town.
A quarter of a century before 80s pop video, Alma Kogan starred in a Steam Age film version. While the setting was natural, Alma's rise had required more calculation.
God gives people a voice. And what you do with it, you can make it grow, you can extend it, but you can't change the inherent quality. And he didn't give Alma a great voice. And I'm sorry, but that is a fact of life. Does he? Some people he did, but he didn't give her. So she had to do it a different way.
The different way was the delivery of a package to an era struggling out of war, rationing, drabness and queues. It included an over-the-top style and Baroque dresses which owed a distant debt to Dior's 40s new look. The result was her first hit, Bell-Bottom Blues, and a catchphrase at the dawn of the media's interest in pop, the girl with a giggle in her voice.
She got a fit of the giggles over something in a quite straightforward lyric, and the giggle appeared in her voice.
She wore a little jacket of blue.
And I heard this, and I thought that it had a great, great novelty, fresh, saleable value. And that's where it came from, and that was the beginning of the giggle in the voice.
She wore a little jacket of blue. She kept that little jacket of blue. And all the sailors knew just why she wore his jacket of blue. She asked the leaves that fell from the tree. She asked the breeze that came from the sea. Where can my lover be? Oh, won't you send him homeward to me? She climbed aboard each whaler, said to every sailor, tell me true, where is my boy in blue?
And it became her trademark because of its originality and because of its freshness. And she wasn't serious anymore. It was a whole new thing, a whole happy-sounding thing, do you see? And if you get the right song, and the song works for that sort of thing, you just start, dreamboat, you lovable dreamboat. And if you do this with a giggle in your voice, that's what you got.
That one, Dreamboat, she used to put the giggle in her voice, came out a lot in that. Never at the same time. I mean, she goes, just about there.
You dreamboats, you lovable dreamboats. The kisses you gave me set my dreams afloat.
The 50s was naive or innocent because the media were naive and innocent. Now it seems everybody knows that there's an industry which depends on producing and consuming images. And also people now sense what it means to be consumed, you know. If you're the image who gets consumed, then there's going to be some sort of price to pay, I think. In the 50s, you couldn't reproduce an image in your house. You couldn't capture somebody's essence quickly and consume it privately the way you can these days.
The 50s had a particular quality which was totally different from the 60s. I mean, you'd very much place her as being from the 50s, wouldn't you, with that kind of ball gown on and the bright red lipstick, and maybe even just the idea of holding your teeth together when you smile was places you in time, as a 50s phenomenon. The black, the thick eyelashes, which then went on into the 60s, a certain kind of hairstyle. I mean, it's a phenomenon that doesn't seem to exist anymore, that kind of singer.
At 8:30 by the sycamore tree, I'll be there, wait and see, 'cause I've got a date by the sycamore tree with someone I adore.
I think the importance of her and people like her is that they represented England's first taste of popular culture. The mainstream of English life at that time was terrified of youth, glamour, all those things, sexiness, all those things we now think of as popular culture. Alma Kogan, I think, was one of the first great embodiments of those things. She threw off that kind of stultifying, boring Englishness.
With everything just right, we're all in love by the sycamore tree tonight.
Alma Kogan looked to America for her style. As a kid in the 40s, she had absorbed the romance of Tin Pan Alley and the glitter of Hollywood. Born in Golders Green in 1932 of an East European Jewish immigrant family, she was singing at 14 and debuting in the chorus of London's High Button Shoes alongside Audrey Hepburn in 1949. In 1950, she met Walter Ridley. He signed her to HMV, but told her to get more practice, so she took an engagement at the Cumberland Hotel in Marble Arch. The pre-giggle records were passable, but uninspired. The sound was American, but the singing was by numbers. Yet a spark was there.
Of my life, the thing supreme in my life.
A young scriptwriter on the top radio show, Take It From Here, saw her at the Cumberland.
I saw this girl there who was completely unfazed by all the clinking of cutlery and people chomping on small hors d'oeuvres and pot of tea for three, and was singing with such enjoyment, with such relish, that the whole place seemed to have a kind of cheerful air about it, which was not really very characteristic of that type of establishment at that time. And I was very struck with her and went back to Charles Maxwell, found it difficult to explain, sent him along there, and then there was no one else in the race.
Yes, Dick Bentley and Jimmy Edwards will be on hand for the next 30 minutes, with June Whitfield, Alma Kogan, Wallace Eaton and the keynotes, all inviting you to...
Girls, do you have trouble finding an escort to take you to the dance?
Then why not go along unaccompanied, like Alma Kogan?
20 tiny fingers,
20 Tiny Fingers, together with Where Will the Baby's Dimple Be, located Alma Kogan as radio's big sister. Then she made the transition to a new medium. After the coronation in 1953, television had taken off. Beaming out on baby boom families, she was an idea whose time had come. There were catchy tunes for recalcitrant 5-year-olds, unthreatening sexiness for dad, and coziness, plus surreal dress pattern ideas for mum.
I'm singing in the kitchen, singing in the hallway, singing on the garden path. Tomorrow at 8:30, I'll be singing in my bath. But I need...
You heard people like Alma on radio and on records, and you got them into a television studio as quickly as you could.
You need fire. It's bands that really play.
She was everybody's favourite guest. She would sing, she'd dance a little, she'd engage in crosstalk, could handle a funny line extremely well. So she was, and she looked good. So she was a gift to any television producer.
She was a great close-up person. I mean, you could go as close as you liked on Alma with a camera. And she wore clothes that, as I say, sparkled, and she lit the screen up. And she had enormous confidence, you see. And this was probably her greatest attribute, was her confidence. She attacked the audience nicely with a small A. You know, when she sang at you, you know you'd been sung at.
The coming of television obviously played a huge role in promoting someone like Alma Kogan, because it was new, you know, and the essence of popular culture, as we now know it, but we didn't know it 35 years ago, is newness, sexiness, newness. The two are interchangeable. So television coming into people's homes and British post-war homes obviously was the most exciting thing that had happened probably since the war.
After the show, the Queen and the Duke met many of the performers, introduced by Jack Hilton, here are Alma Kogan and Arthur Askey.
Between 1955 and 1960, Alma was at the top, but her rise hadn't just been a question of hits, frocks, or even, prized word of the decade, personality. Alma was no bimbo hiding behind a manager. Unusually for those times, she managed her career, redirecting it as the 50s fattened from austerity into affluence. It was a trick she could perform then.
It was just like she was the chairman of a big business. She was probably one of the strongest characters around in her particular era. She had more on the ball than almost any other girl singers. You see, this is the interesting thing to me about Alma. you had to go to Alma to find out anything you wanted to know. She never went to anybody else to find out. She worked it out for herself. Those eyes, those big brown eyes, would look right through you and would pull you apart and put you together again while they're looking at you.
The giggly girl singer and the dresses were the television image. I mean, she never wore those dresses outside her show. She had the same infectious, amusing, giggling personality, but every line was not dizzy at all. It was based on a great deal of thought and study of everything. I would say most people wouldn't have known that she could be a very hard businesswoman.
She would arrange to have lunch with, to have dinner with, to be at any function where she knew a personality was going to get the press would be there. She would be with them. And when there were any pictures to be taken, she would be there.
Charlie Drake's first film, Sands of the Desert, is launched at a star-studded world premiere in Blackpool. Here's Alma Kogan with Pearl Carr and Teddy Johnson.
Stars among the guests included Harry Fowler and Andrew Ray. Alma Kogan was another.
You, me, and I, we are my favorite people. We all go together like peaches and cream, our bells with a church and a steeple. Some people I know I'm fond of, and so all day I keep singing about them. For one of them's you, and darling, it's true.
She was one of the only people at the time who used to try to keep us all together, keep a group of, you know, stars, as we're called at times. I don't know why they call us stars, but keeping a group of big-name people all together. And she'd have these wonderful parties in the apartment at Kensington. And you could walk into that apartment and there would be Roger Moore, Tommy Steele and Stanley Baker playing a very heavy game of poker in one little room, and away from that there'd be loads of other people. She'd always have a group playing. Shortly after the Beatles became famous, she got them up there.
Alma, you have a reputation for giving all sorts of parties with different decor and odd ideas. Are you planning on doing something spectacular in the near future?
Yes, I've got a fabulous idea for a Christmas party, but I'm not going to tell you about it, Keith, because you're involved in it. You'll have to wait and see.
They knew they could come and just have a great time, or play roulette with my mother, or go and have their fortune told. We used to have a fortune teller in my bedroom, and for £1 they could have their fortune read. And, so I think it was that, just having fun. And you know, as one we had for Tommy Steele, we all dressed up as children, because he doesn't drink. So we had lemonade and sweets and a magician. And there'd be people like Cary Grant sitting on the floor. He didn't wear shorts there.
Alma Kogan's parties were famous. Young John Lennon, old Noel Coward. New singers and vintage stars made it to Kensington. Kogan kept her private life just that. Parties were social and personal. The press and show business colleagues were left to plan her marriages.
Mrs. Cogan? You are Mrs. Cogan, aren't you?
Miss Cogan?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm ever so sorry. Never mind. Is that through choice, or can't you find anybody? Oh, never mind. Well, you're better off on your own.
It's interesting how obsessed the press was at the time with the fact that she wasn't married and all the explanations that she was forced to give. And they're actually, each explanation, if you read the stories, they're all different. But she's always, oh, yes, I've been proposed to lots of time, but the right man hasn't come along, and so on. Now, what's interesting about the way she talks is that she both says the right man hasn't come along, and of course I want Mr. Right, but also says, well, it's wonderful to live in this new era where women can be bachelor girls and just have a career and be independent. So in a way, she seems with part of herself to be saying, actually, I'm not interested in all this marriage stuff. What I'm interested in is being a singer, having a career and having a good time.
I never saw her look affectionately at anybody, man or woman. I certainly never saw her touch anybody in any way, ever. All the hours and time we spent working together all those years ago, never at any time did I ever see her make an affectionate gesture to anybody, ever. She was like running a business, you know. I mean, you don't do that. You get on with it. What's the next thing to do? Where do we go from here?
She wouldn't let anything stand in the way of her ambition. I don't mean to say she'd walk over people or anything like that, because far from that. I used to call her Auntie Alma. Everyone used to come to her with if they got any problems, you know. Let's talk it out, Alm, that sort of thing. So she wasn't nasty, but I mean, nothing stood in her way of her ambition. What she wanted to do, and she was going to do it. She did it.
Yes, I've had a love of my own like yours.
By the 60s, pop and rock and rollers had finally shunted a generation of family-oriented balladeers into a siding. Cogan's response to the new wave, since she wasn't going to beat them, was to be greeted by them. The mid-50s, television-watching children were growing up. She was still Big Sister.
Hi, Alma, come on over and say hello. Come on. Say hello.
Is that the way you talk to your guests? Really? You'll have to learn, you know.
She became a part of the past. And because she was over the top visually, the people who controlled these things, had had enough. They didn't want that. And of course, she was then in charge of her affairs to such an extent that she determined what was going to happen. And she was now deciding what she was going to record.
Once, in my big-headed way, I thought I'd bring my symphony. It's one of these rather heavy things, and there's quite a lot of melodies in it. And Alma were listening to it, and they said, I love that. I think we could make a song of that. Something like that. It's a long, long time ago, or something like that. And all this thing that was going on, there were little melodies like that all the way through it. Well, Alma heard this, and she went, la, la, la. It's a lovely little tune, ain't it? So I said, oh, that is this? Yes. La, 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 la. I said, wonder what it's like if we put a rhythm to it. So I said, no, it's a symphony. She said, no, let's put a rhythm to it and see what happens. So we did, and of course the rhythms in those days were the hooligan sort of thing. Suddenly it seemed it could work, you know. She lowered it and siled it and this and the other, and then we started to put some words to it. And as a matter of fact, we came up with this thing called Just Once More.
Just once more, let me kiss you just once more. Let me hold you, please, just once more.
Just Once More, Foster and Cogan's response to long hair, blue jeans and Mersey beat was deft, spot on, and didn't make the British top 20. Cover versions were hits abroad. Despite her talent for reinvention, the spirit of the times had gone elsewhere. So she did too, touring a world where 50s Baroque rather than 60s shock was still in vogue. With her usual application, she sang in 6 languages, got hits in many of them, recorded ballads and covered Beatles material. But after more than a decade, television's love affair with her had cooled.
Oh, yeah.
She was such a fantastic television animal, you know. And for some reason, she took to it, and it took to her. And in a way, it seemed like her life, her only life, was in front of a theatre audience or a television camera. And in a way, when her celebrity was taken away from her in the early 60s, after the Beatles and the Liverpool stuff all happened, she almost stopped living in a fairly kind of essential way. You know, something about her life had kind of seeped out of her. And that being robbed of the television camera and being robbed of large audiences somehow robbed her of a part of herself that she felt she needed to go on existing as this media person.
Nu ska vi dock fortsätta med Alma Kogan. Alma brukar kallas för flickan med skrattet i rösten. Men tyvärr...
Thank you for making me so welcome in your wonderful country. And thank you for making this next song a #1 hit.
Far away, Cogan had homed in on England's answer to the Las Vegas cabaret circuit. Distant but lucrative outposts of old empire, new Europe and emerging Japan. She was probably making more money than in the 50s, but her stardom was no longer specific to Britain. She had become that more nebulous being, an international artiste. Yet the further her light spread, the dimmer it was. In 1966, while touring Sweden, she collapsed on stage and was rushed to hospital. Back in London, the illness was diagnosed as inoperable stomach cancer.
I went to see her and asked her if she... I found out that she was perfectly capable of working and that she was dying. And I gave her a special to do. And I remember going down to see her, and she was, you know, full of sparkle and full of everything. But you could tell that she was, you know, that she was not well. It just seemed such an appalling shame that someone with her amount of life and vitality should be hit by this foul illness.
Let there be wind and occasional rain. Chili con carne, bubbling champagne.
BBC2's International Cabaret in autumn 1966 was Alma Kogan's final appearance on the medium she had married in the 50s. She died a month later on October the 26th.
The fact that she died, like lots of other stars died, and in a way was seen to be paying some sort of price, means that she still goes on living, you know, in people's lives, and has taken on this kind of mystique or glamour or aura or whatever you want to call it. I think people always want to believe that there's an equation that glamour plus success in the end always equals out to some kind of personal unhappiness or tragedy. You know, and she died when she was very young, 34. People feel that their own small lives are in some way compensated for by these large lives. That's the role that celebrities play in post-war life.
This is the BBC television service. The time you are looking at does not necessarily bear any relation to the real time. It is merely a decorative clock put there for you to look at and enjoy before the next program. And now I am informed that we can in fact go over to cricket, the first test against the Sri Lankans at a cricket ground. And we join the match as a run has just been scored. That's a good ball. I can't quite see from here, and a different batsman seems to be batting now, doing very well there, running two. That'll be caught, I think. Yes, and he's out.
I say, I thought it was a test match. Who's the fellow in one piece?
I think it's Ian Botham, sir, silly mid-on.
What, with a body like that?
He's been on a diet, you know.
Nothing lovelier than the sound of willow thrashing on skin.
Let the test match commence.
Just like a sauna bath here at Lord's as well. 22 for no wicket. We don't have all the natural appendages that go with it, but we can tell you we have plenty of excitement. Philip de Freitas is the man. And taking strike against him at Lord's in 1991 is Brendan Karupu, holder of the record for the slowest double century in the history of the game. Target set for Sri Lanka 423. And they'll rewrite the history books and the statistical books if they make it. It will be the biggest win ever in the fourth innings. That's a nice start. It takes them on to 26 for no wicket. Karupu is outscoring Haturu Singha, who made 66 in the first innings.
De Freitas just short here, off the back foot, slightly uppish, but big gap there between third slip and gully. No real danger.
They're the figures we're talking about. India against West Indies, Port of Spain, 75-6. They made 406 for 4. That is the biggest win in the history of Test cricket, beating the Australians at Headingley 1948, where they made 404 for 3. Haturu Singha has the walk away from the wicket, reminiscent of Chris Tavares some years ago. Goes good 10 to 15 yards, then makes his way back in time for the bowler as the latter reaches the end of his run. Fielder. Tufnell hasn't been used so far, but he will come into this England attack. He'll be a vital part of it, bowling left arm spin, probably, I would think, from the nursery end.